Can everyone hear me up the back? Hopefully those people can't hear us too much because then we'll be like interrupting their session. But yeah, what can you do? Okay, so welcome to the Life After Coal, Worker Solidarity and the Transition Public Forum. Thank you everyone for coming along and being part of the blockade. You're all staunch and awesome. Tonight's forum is co-hosted by Green Left and Rising Tide, and we're like very honoured to be co-hosting an event with Rising Tide, who have, you know, over the last almost 20 years developed a pretty formidable activist machine, and we love their work. So Green Left was founded in 1991. We aim to give a voice to people power movements, cover the sort of stuff that the mainstream media won't cover or doesn't do justice to. We cover feminists, anti-war, First Nations, union, climate activists, enviro struggles. I'm pretty sure Green Left has done coverage of every blockade since OG 2005, and yeah, we'll be covering this one. So please subscribe and support independent media, and help us keep ticking along, because we are a lean activist media machine, and so every subscriber really helps keep it ticking along and is very appreciated. Okay, so tonight's forum, we're grappling with the question of how do we have a worker-friendly transition away from coal. Partly that's about justice, because people who work in the coal industry are just trying to pay their rent, pay their mortgage, whatever, keep a roof over their head and food in their belly. But it's also about creating the conditions for coal workers to join us in putting spanners in the industry. We aren't there yet. We might be in 5 or 10 years if we can grow our movement, and we might never get there. But I think it's a good idea to try and create the conditions where coal workers would feel comfortable coming along to an event like this and helping to shut down the industry for more than 30 hours. So yeah, that's pretty much the vibe tonight. Our speakers, tonight our speakers are Tim Lang from Labour Environment Action Network, Lee May Brusey, who is on the board of Cooperative Power on behalf of Friends of the Earth Melbourne, Matt Jeffrey, who is a proud Wadi man of the Darawal Nation, Maddy Yerbury, who is from Wollongong and is part of the group Tomorrow Movement. And we've also got Grant Howard, who has been a coal worker for 43 years, and we are honoured and stoked to have Grant here as part of this forum. So, without further ado, let's get on to our first speaker. So, Tim Lang is the New South Wales organiser of the Labour Environment Action Network, or LEAN. Tim's work with LEAN is focused on the energy transition in regional New South Wales, and in particular, the Hunter. Tim is Newcastle local, a co-founder of the Hunter Jobs Alliance, and has been involved in successful campaigns to change state and federal ALP policy platforms. And tonight, we're probably going to be talking about some big picture, where can we get over the next 5 or 10 years and really try and start to build those links with coal workers and build a massive, powerful movement. But I guess Tim is wanting to talk about a very important campaign that's happening right now. So there's been a union-backed campaign to get offshore wind built here, and there are some nasty people pushing back against it. And to their great credit, Tim and unions in this area are really digging in their heels and saying, no, you are not going to torpedo our big offshore wind farm. So I think that's really important work that they're doing. And I will let Tim speak further on this. So welcome, Tim.
Sweet. Thanks, Zane, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for having me. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Awabakal land and pay my respects to elders and their eons of custodianship. It's such beautiful land here in Newcastle. And it's great to see so many people turn out to protect our climate. It's such an important time to be reminding people that climate action must happen, and it must happen at speed. Life after coal. It's been a change coming for a long time, but one this region has found very difficult to discuss. When I started participating in climate activism, the main feature of our local politics was the culture war centred around jobs versus the environment. As a result, there was no plan for the future of jobs in our region or the way we should support people through a change everyone knew was knocking at the door. That made fear really easy to peddle. Enter the Hunter Jobs Alliance, initially proposed as a grassroots think tank that would allow workers to engage in the discussion about their own futures. It evolved into that and more. Really changed the conversation locally and is a great model for talking about the transition in a way that allows affected workers and regional communities like the Hunter to participate in the conversation. Looking back, really, the success of Hunter Jobs has been in making a positive vision of a low-carbon future tangible to communities like ours. Campaigns around an authority to manage the change and a TAFE system to train the local workforce of the future give working people in our region belief that their future is going to look bright. They give people belief and they also attract investment. What people really need to see is that their children or they themselves can go to TAFE and get a qualification in something like wind farm manufacturing or maintenance, and that there will be a job waiting for them on the other end. They need to be able to feel this future with their own hands. The declaration of the Hunter Offshore Wind Zone is a huge step in the right direction here. The jobs are finally becoming real, even though actual construction of those projects is a long way off. There will be 3,000 jobs in construction, 1,560 ongoing jobs in maintenance. Imagine when everyone knows someone whose family is supported by a job in renewables, when renewables sponsor local sports clubs rather than Port Waratah coal services. This isn't just good for our community, but really in terms of meeting renewables targets and ensuring energy security, it couldn't have come soon enough. In the first half of this year, we only had 3 renewables projects commencing construction in the entire national electricity market. We need 156 gigawatts of renewable capacity in order to be able to close coal plants by 2030. And this works out to be 12.7 gigawatts per annum. That's double our current build rate. If we want to decarbonise in line with 1.5 degrees C, then we need to double that build rate again. At the moment, we're on track for 65% renewables by 2030 rather than 82%. The Hunter Offshore Wind Zone alone was initially proposed to be 8 gigawatts of power, although this has been scaled back to 5 gigawatts after opposition during the consultation process. The wind off the coast here blows hard and it blows often. That fact will help relieve some of the stress on storage resources and contribute to our ability to produce and one day export green hydrogen here in the port rather than coal. There are always impacts from ports of the scale proposed off the Hunter, and we shouldn't dismiss those. But there's a lot of misinformation being peddled, and publicly engaging in the debate about specifics that really risks leaning into the momentum the far right is trying to build in opposition to renewables. Lean is focusing on process solutions for these projects to address shortcomings in our environment laws, namely having an independent body such as the CSIRO take money in trust from developers and commission zone-wide assessments. This process also provides the chance to reset stakeholder engagement and shorten the time that the department takes to assure studies. Whatever navigating this looks like, we must navigate it together in a way that supports the speed of the renewables rollout. The Black Summer bushfires are estimated to have killed 1 billion animals alone, and that's only one event in a decades-long crisis. I don't need to tell everyone here how critical the situation is. The biggest threat to our renewables build out and its responsible execution are the AstroTurf campaigns coordinated by far-right media, coordinated by far-right actors along with their amplifiers in the media. They know that there are always social licence challenges with big infrastructure, and are intent on opening a new culture war, one where it's climate versus the environment. Locally, the conversation around climate action has been more difficult the further you move up the valley, but recently we've seen opposition on the coast in places like Port Stephens and Hawke's Nest. Climate versus the environment, or maybe more aptly climate versus your backyard, is redrawing the map when it comes to local support for action. I believe it's the right's hope that they can open up a new culture war and stir the same fear around the economic future a low-carbon economy can provide as well. Even just spending a few tragic nights trawling through offshore wind opposition Facebook groups will show these themes pretty clearly. We absolutely have to push back. I think to when Abbott took power and the things that saw him into it. A cost of living crisis, outrage around climate action, the carbon tax. We can't let the national anti-renewables rally scheduled for Canberra early next year be a mirror to that rally where Abbott famously stood in front of the Ditch the Witch sign. Supporters of renewable energy will be organising our own mass rallies in Newcastle and Wollongong a couple of days before. They're scheduled to hold theirs in Canberra to try and stem that momentum they might build and provide a counter-narrative. Let the anti-renewables crowd be the ones operating from the Canberra bubble. We'll stay here and advocate for the jobs right here in the communities that need them. You might have received one of the flyers that we distributed to 7,000 homes around Nelson Bay over the weekend. Or if not, it looks like you're about to receive one soon. There's a QR code on there. If you want to stay in touch with support campaigns, or if you want to get involved, just come up and speak to me after the panel. Happy to have a chat. It's been heartening to see that offshore wind here and in the Illawarra, it's coalitions of, the support for it, it's coalitions of environmentalists and unionists working together for our future. It reminds me of the analysis that really lay at the heart of the Hunter Jobs Alliance. That in the 20th century, our politics was dominated by a struggle between labour and capital. But in the 21st century, the third factor of production, the environment, has been stretched so thin that it too shapes our politics. The way we win from here is workers and the environment acting together to proactively build the future.
Word. Thanks heaps, Tim. Sorry, just distracted there, getting some leaflets into the hands of the people. And yeah, to their great credit, as mentioned, Hunter workers were out there letterboxing, heaps of them up around Nelson Bay just recently. And as someone who was at the first blockade of the coal port in 2005, to think that, nearly 20 years later, that there would be this real strong campaign by the union movement here to dig in and say, we are not going to let you torpedo this wind farm because it is part of getting off fossil fuels, is very inspiring, very good to see. So, yeah, respect. All right, our next speaker is Brusey. is a member director of Cooperative Power on behalf of Friends of the Earth Melbourne, who are proud co-owners of Copower, along with several unions and environmental organisations and co-ops. is also a climate activist campaigning with Friends of the Earth and other enviro organisations, and has a keen interest in renewable energy and I operate on the basis of random notes. Is partly going to report back about the inaugural Transform Expo that was happening down in Gippsland just recently, probably about 2 months ago or something. Yeah. We'll also be talking about the role that worker co-ops can play as part of generating alternative jobs. So please make Lee May welcome.
Thank you everyone for being here, and it's really humbling because this is very spur of the moment. So sorry if I kind of and stuff like that. Okay, so where Copower is very relevant to what the transition is going to look like is because Copower is an energy provider, but it's a cooperative. It's not one of those big ones like AGL or Energy Australia, right? It's owned by people, unions, environmental organizations, cooperatives of cooperatives. So this is trying to show that everyone in the community can have a stake in what the new transition looks like. So I'll just give you a little bit more background. So cooperative power, we actually get our power from energy locals, so we're national. So plug for Copower, right? Like, look it up, and you get a 50-50 referral bonus. So refer each other, and you can get $50 off. Anyway, now our members are ASU, NTEU, AU, UWU, Brusey, which is Ballarat Renewable Energy and Zero Emissions. It's a community-based organisation. ANMF, Union Aid Abroad, Earth Worker Cooperative, and all the subsidiary cooperatives of Earth Worker, Friends of the Earth, of course, Surf Coast Energy Cooperative, Energy Innovation Cooperative, and Environment Victoria. So we offer energy to people on wholesale rates. We don't put anything up. No lock-ins, we're all non-profit. So what we get, we plow back into the community. And we also support, and we've bought our first part in community renewables energy generation, yay. So that's hopefully the first of many. And also during the COVID pandemic, we knew that some people were having difficulty paying for bills, so we supported them throughout that process. And so, there's ways and means. We're a democratic organization. There's always ways to help each other out. Okay, now when it comes to transformation and transition, just a report on Transform Expo that was in October. It was the inaugural event, and it was held in the heart of coal country in Victoria, in the Latrobe Valley, in Gippsland. So we made that, so it was organized by Yes to Renewables at Friends of the Earth, and it was purposefully determined that everyone could go to that expo for free. And during that expo, people from the wind industry, the solar industry, any industry that's to do with renewables were there showcasing what they were doing. And also, it was really, really highlighted to us that there's a desperate need for people to join the renewables industry. And it's so important that coal workers know that it's fairly easy to transition to the renewables industry because their skills are what is needed. With a little bit of extra training, a little bit of change. So one thing that the Victorian government's been doing is just running free careers counselling, and they've been ramping up courses with TAFEs and universities to help people transition to the renewables industry. Not only that, when you have a new industry like the renewables, there are so many different ways to generate new renewable energy, and there are so many different parts to it that you need a huge collection of different skills, so that you need First Nations knowledge in how they manage ecosystems. You also need scientists, like, for instance, environmental assessments that are done. There was environmental assessment that needed to be done for the offshore wind project. So there were lots of differently skilled people who joined. And the one thing that really stuck up for me is that in Victoria, backtrack a little bit. So the federal government needed to put in policies to allow offshore wind development because it's in kind of like federal waters, not state waters. That took a long time with ScoMo in power, but now it's happening, then offshore wind projects proposals have got up and running. But the thing that really stuck out to me was that all these different projects are fully funded. And you know what? They're fully funded by people from overseas who see the potential in Australian renewables. We can get in the act. I think 100% people in Latrobe Valley have already seen this, that they can get into the act by working together and creating kind of like skill sets. For instance, there's a locally grown renewable energy engineering company, and they have been engaged by overseas companies to put up a project. So the control is all local, and ultimately the jobs are all going to go to the community. And so this is a really powerful way to kind of uplift the skill in the community and also involve everyone in the community. One other thing that was really stark was that Latrobe Valley, horrifyingly, has got a huge percentage of domestic violence and you know, I suppose abuse of families and so on, because predominantly in the past the coal industry has been quite kind of like macho and male-oriented, and it's been quite corporatized. But with the shift to renewables, because of the mix of technologies that you can use in renewables, that is no longer the case. You can now have a far more equitable and community-based energy system and production. And so I believe that the people can take back the power, just like the school strikers have said just recently. Okay, that bit. Okay. Lastly, I reckon that because the climate crisis has got so bad, getting to zero emissions is not good enough. It's not enough to make our temperatures go low. So what we have to do is, I believe, the 3 R's. Okay, this is where I stand up and do something stupid. so right, keep the carbon in the ground, bury in the ground. Okay, ramp up all the renewables by community and restore and replenish all our environment, all our ecosystems that absorb carbon. Okay, that's it.
Thank you very much, Lee May. And I think, yeah, you raise a really good point about, I guess there's not a silver bullet for transition, and part of creating alternative jobs and creating a more equitable society is about creating jobs for women in these new industries, and is about building up those public services that have been just allowed to decay over the last 30 or 40 years. We've got a massive housing shortage. There's, yeah, not enough women's shelters. We need more public transport infrastructure. There's all sorts of stuff like this, and there's lots of new jobs to be created. Thank you. Now, it is remiss of me, actually, in the excitement of this evening's proceedings and being amongst all of you cool people and amongst these very cool people, I did forget to give an acknowledgement of country, and so it is important to recognise that, yeah, Gurrung-speaking people from Mullumbimba and the wider Awabakal and Worimi areas. Sovereignty was never ceded in this area, and respect to elders past, present and emerging, including Teresa Duggan, who gave the smoking ceremony this evening, which I found really inspiring and moving, and particularly when Teresa was talking about, yeah, when she kind of takes over the reins and becomes an elder, there's an opportunity to create new dreaming stories. And yeah, I do wonder what people will be looking back at this period of history 500 years from now and talking about what went down. I thought that was a really kind of profound thing for Teresa to have said. All right, now, on that note, somewhat, our next speaker is Matt Jeffrey. Matt is a proud Wadi man of the Darawal Nation and is a land rights activist and committed unionist. Matt is currently studying geography at the University of Newcastle. And Matt has written and participated a bit in the campaign to stop fracking up in the Pilliga. And I think there's, yes. And yeah, I think there's lessons to be learned from that, because whether it's the Pilliga or Musselbrook or Morwell or the Bowen Basin, I think there are small communities where there is extractivist projects either happening or proposed, and these little communities potentially don't feel like they have much voice in the places like the big cities where a lot of the politicians come from. So I think there's a lot of work to be done to reach out. And to do that, you need huge campaigns. And Matt, I think, has really got his head around that. And yeah, it's awesome to have you here. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, mate. I'd just like to shout out my comrades that are here as well. We've got Ale here and Almac. They are proud ASU comrades, been working really hard in the rank and file fight to bring our union to a position of liberation for Palestine. So, welcome, comrades. I guess I just wanted to start with a quote from my favourite economist. He's an Australian, Ted Wheelwright, from the 80s. And he has something where he says in one of his... it's an RFX memorial lecture. RFX was a minister of the Crown, for industry, I think, and minerals, the first, and there was a brief stint where Australia tried economic nationalism in regards to public energy generation and distribution and extraction. But the quote is, interdependency is just another new word for neocolonialism. And I think that why I bring this word up is because interdependency, it's actually a twisted version of interdependency, right? It's a twisted set of relationships to the earth and to other human beings, and that's what creates that type of interdependency, where we have shifted... Oh,
sorry, I might switch that. It's a bit dodgy.
Thanks, mate. Yeah. Yeah, it's a twisted version of interdependency. So I guess... the reason why I bring this up particularly is because I went to a lecture recently in honour of Ted Wheelwright by Professor Heidi Norman. And her research project, which is coming out early next year, is actually looking at... She interviewed every single local Aboriginal Land Council in the state of New South Wales to figure out what the fuck do First Nations people want from the biggest transition of our fucking lives. And I think it's really important to platform her work. I tried to invite her to come tonight, but she couldn't. But I really implore every person here to have a look at that work when it's released early next year, because we need to be in on the ground, and we have an awesome opportunity to really change how we fundamentally relate, to bring it to a kind of interdependency with each other that is not twisted, that is not exploitative, and is not extractive. I just wanted to say a brief couple of words on the on campaigning, and I think I was really inspired earlier this year to go in a youth delegation to the Pilliga, and we did invite Bubbly, who's a Gamilaroi man, whose country that project is on, the Narrabri coal seam gas project. We did invite him to come tonight, but he unfortunately couldn't make it. But it was really inspiring to go in a youth delegation and then with Unions New South Wales and to see, you know, there's always this push that the people in the bush or in the outback, you know, we're not strong together. You know, the people in the hunter, they could never ever come to the same conclusions and try and build a new future together. They could never do that. But it's bullshit, because just 4 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago, we had, you know, despite the difference with the farmers, the historical difference of, settler colonialism, that small thing, we had New South Wales Farmers, Country Women's Association, I guess from my perspective, blocks of organisations that can seem somewhat conservative on the outer. But when you drill down into it, we were all there together out the front of Parliament, New South Wales Parliament House, calling on that dog Chris Minns to fuck off the Narrabri coal seam gas project. And that is an entire community that's come together. They're a regional community, they're a small community, but they're not small in power. And I think what we need to understand, what is our imperative in regards to the Hunter region and Newcastle and this port, of mostly immiseration, is that we see these examples of communities coming together, and yes, through mechanisms like the Hunter Jobs Alliance, but also with others, understand that we humans need to be planning our futures, right? But bugger one company with 12 board controllers who sit off in nowhere land, planning our futures. We need to be planning our futures. We need to be planning generationally in advance. And that's why I'm really heartened by Rising Tide's action this weekend in continuing the spirit of the port blockade. And I think I am just so humbled that there are so many active minds now working towards building it. The last thing I want to say is, I think the struggle that we have is that union density is at a very low point. So what I've been heartened by amongst other things, apart from, intra-Indigenous solidarity with Palestinian struggle, what I've been heartened by in that rank and file organising effort within unions, where we're seeing thousands of union members create meetings that are democratic, they are swelling the numbers of unions themselves. People are joining unions for the first time because they are seeing what other humans are doing in a democratic way to challenge the stultified leadership of these so-called, socialist things. So I really think that we have an awesome opportunity to change the relationship settings so that we have an interdependency that goes beyond profit, that goes beyond extractivism, that goes beyond the cost of living crisis. The three biggest costs that we all face are food, housing, and energy. And we can strike off energy this fucking decade.
Thanks heaps, Matt. And I'm really excited about that report that's being released by Heidi Norman, because it strikes me, I don't know, thinking back to the climate strikes in late 2019, those absolutely massive protests that swept so much of this part of the world and other parts of the world as well. You could really feel the power and the potential to really start to change things. And I think if we can rebuild that sort of movement, I think it is possible for us to be able to put demands on government and say we want $100 billion of investment in alternative job creation so that we can move away from coal exports. But if we're going to do that, then we might as well pay the rent and build up infrastructure that is missing in Aboriginal communities, create jobs for Aboriginal people, create Aboriginal controlled renewables. So I think Heidi Norman's report that's coming out next year looks at a lot of that, and I'm very excited to read that, and I hadn't heard about it until you raised it, Matt, so thank you for drawing our attention to that. All right, our next speaker is Maddy Yerbury. Maddy is a climate justice organiser. Maddy was born in Wollongong on Darawal country and studied biology at the Uni of Wollongong. Maddy has a strong passion for environmental and social justice and got into climate activism at uni. Maddy's been involved with Tomorrow Movement and is interested in building community power by bringing people together and at the intersection of climate and economic and social justice. Maddy, we'll get Maddy to talk about the Tomorrow Movement's Climate Jobs Guarantee, and this sort of intersection of tackling these like extreme inequality that we've got under neoliberalism and tackling the climate crisis alongside all these other crises at the same time. So please make Maddy welcome.
Thank you. And I want to thank all the other panel members who have contributed today and acknowledge that we are meeting on unceded Awabakal and Worimi lands. I come from Darawal country in Wollongong, and I appreciate that we're only here because of the custodianship and deep knowledge First Nations people hold in relationship with country. And I want to show my appreciation by acknowledging First Nations leadership, past and present, and truly stand in solidarity with First Nations struggles. There is no climate justice without First Nations justice and Indigenous rights everywhere, not just on this continent. So that means showing up, standing up, and listening deeply to truth-telling. I'm going to reiterate a lot of the sentiments that you've kind of laid out for us there, Matt. And I think, right now we have a moral obligation to be speaking up for the colonial violence and genocide we're seeing happening against Indigenous peoples in Palestine.
Climate movement too.
This extenuation of the colonial project must not be ignored. Call your MPs, your government representatives, Penny Wong, Albo's office, join and support boycotts and peaceful protests. Don't look away. We need to keep up the pressure and not give in to compassion fatigue. The colonial project, which has occurred across the globe, mostly by European countries, is at the root of the system that has brought us into climate catastrophe. We must understand and acknowledge this connection. Climate change, mass ecological collapse, and the colonisation of Indigenous lands have not just coincidentally co-occurred. They are part of the same system which exploits the earth and the global majority to allow for a few at the top to accumulate mass wealth. We need to fight for justice everywhere if we are to truly have climate justice, not just climate action. I want to zoom in a bit now to make the connection, I guess, that others have already gone over to connect between climate justice and the topic of today's forum, workers and the transition to renewables. And I'll start by talking about why I'm here to speak on behalf of Tomorrow Movement. Tomorrow Movement was started by a group of young people who saw a gap in the way that climate movements work to address the climate crisis. There's this idea that to solve this crisis, we need to leave fossil fuels behind, literally overnight, and go full stream ahead on a path towards renewable energy, no looking back. And at one point I thought this way: the climate crisis is this impending catastrophe, and we need to act swiftly if we are to heed the worst impacts. So a couple of jobs here or there, better than literal climate collapse, right? When I first heard about Tomorrow Movement and their focus on climate jobs, to be honest, I wasn't convinced. Jobs, surely there's more important issues than jobs that we need to be focusing on. But slowly, with lots of impromptu chats from my good friend and fellow Tomorrow Movement organiser, Jack, I realised that what Tomorrow Movement is fighting for is a climate justice-focused solution to this crisis that holds our communities. We're not leaving anyone behind. So who are we? Tomorrow Movement is an unstoppable movement of young people fighting for a society with good jobs, great public services and a safe climate for all. We are organising young people all over the country to fight for a tomorrow that works for everyone, not just big business. Today we are facing a cost of living crisis, housing crisis, jobs crisis, as the climate crisis worsens. As young people, we have the most at stake for both our present and our future. that we inherit from the decision makers of today. Tomorrow Movement's overarching campaign is the Climate Jobs Guarantee, which is a transformative plan that would solve the climate crisis by creating good jobs that care for our community, our planet, and our climate. The criteria of our Climate Jobs Guarantee is guided by 5 principles. 1, good jobs for everyone who wants one. 2, urgent coordinated action to solve the climate crisis. 3, meaningful work that cares for our communities as decided by our communities. 4, public service jobs in the hands of the public. And 5, a living income for all, whether they work or not. The Climate Jobs Guarantee is a plan that cuts to the core of the climate crisis, which is a system that prioritises the profits of big business over planet and people. It's absurd that in this wealthy country, we force people to choose between food and paying their rent or mortgage repayments. That's why we're fighting for good jobs and for those who don't have paid work. This is one of Tomorrow Movement's key demands, and right now, this starts with raising the rate of income support payments. Everyone deserves to live in dignity, whether they work or not. So we believe we need a plan to transform our current system. We know that the climate crisis requires radical solutions to transform our energy system and radically cut emissions in the next 7 years. But this also provides us with an opportunity. We can design solutions for a transition that create a more just society that doesn't leave anyone behind, like the other panel members have already mentioned this evening. This approach is opportunistic, but it's also crucial. To look at the root cause of the climate crisis, which is our colonial capitalist system, we actually need to incorporate a justice-centred approach, or else big business will just continue to make profits from new, greener energy technologies that continue to exploit people and extract from the earth. It's not a sustainable model. We can't solve the economic, housing, jobs and climate crisis whilst continuing on the same road of colonial capitalism. We have to come up with a transformative plan to change the way we approach politics, economics, and structure our society. And this is why Tomorrow Movement's plan to shift the system is a Climate Jobs Guarantee. We believe climate jobs are not limited to those in renewables. We need jobs that will take us through the energy transition whilst also supporting our communities to adapt, restore our environment, and care for our communities, especially those most impacted by the effects of climate change that they're already experiencing today. The climate crisis will impact every aspect of our lives: our health, our food, our environment, our ability to provide essential services, our experience of extreme weather, the list goes on. So the jobs we need to provide services for our communities are vast and holistic. If there's a service your community needs to adapt for climate resilience, it's what we would consider a climate job. This plan includes a transition for coal miners and other workers in fossil fuel dependent industries that are impacted by the shift to renewables. Workers have not caused the climate crisis. Workers are people doing their best to pay their bills and keep the lights on. We need to be clear that what we are fighting collectively is big business and the capitalist system that are to blame for the climate crisis. And prioritising workers is actually a solution to the climate crisis. And I'll explain that a little bit. We live under a capitalist economic system that requires growth in order to remain healthy or stable. So participants in capitalism, namely big business, must increase their profits every year in order for investors to see financial return. This encourages companies to extract the labour of workers and resources from the land for as little as possible in order to maximise profits. We see that this year, in a cost of living crisis, Coles and Woolworths have made record profits while their workers struggle to afford groceries that have increased on average 7.5% in the last year. Perpetual growth on a finite planet is impossible, and it will lead us to extinction. So if the climate crisis is caused by a system that prioritises big business over people and planet, we need to start by tackling the system that allows corporations to accumulate mass wealth. At the moment, our governments write policies that enable big business to keep growing their profits. But what if they didn't? Rising Tide, who we're all here to support, have made one of the key demands of the blockade a 75% tax on all exports from Newcastle Port.
Yeah. They should pay.
Each coal ship that exits this port makes a profit of about $54 million, which adds up to about $89 billion annually, based on 2021-22 records. Yeah, shame. A 75% tax would mean $66 billion into the community, still leaving a profit of $22 billion for the fossil fuel coal industry. The revenue from this tax could then be used in the community to transition workers who are affected by the move to renewables and other projects to care for the community and provide climate resilience. Taxing the fossil fuel industry and big business to pay for the solutions to the climate crisis that they have caused and are fueling is the first step towards transforming our economic system. These funds can pay for secure jobs, great public services, a living income for all, and a safe climate future. I'm inspired by everyone who's here today. Let's keep up the momentum, organise in our communities, form relationships with our neighbours, and build our social power to fight big business and demand our government to back us in this transformation.
Yeah.
Well said, Maddy. And yes, I think it's very good to be addressing the elephant in the room known as capitalism. It's a big elephant, that one, and it's going to take quite a bit of people power to bring that one down. All right, so our final speaker this evening, and then we'll go to some 2-minute contributions from the floor. Our final speaker is Grant Howard. Grant is a coal worker who has worked in coal mining for over 40 years. Grant has worked in the Illawarra where he's from, and like shout out to all the Wollongong crew in the house tonight, from Dharawal crew in the house tonight, from our sister orbital city, orbital city of Sydney down south there. Orbital Port as well. Orbital Port, yeah. Yeah, the other steel city, sister steel city, they still have steel there, not so much up here. We roll a few things, but okay. I digress though. So Grant is a coal worker who's worked in the coal mining for over 40 years in the Illawarra, also here in the Hunter Valley and in the Bowen Basin where he's currently based. And pretty much what we want to, where we're arriving at was tonight's session. Grant, is how do we get more coal workers like yourself to do what you're doing here and speak out publicly for climate action and come and join us at the blockade. So please make Grant welcome.
Thanks for that kind invitation. And it's been an amazing journey. And when I started in the coal industry when I was 17, the last thing that I thought I would end my career would be in this circumstance. Joining you guys and blockading a coal point. It's quite an amazing journey, and that sort of journey has been. It is interesting to some people. It's been at times difficult for me to reconcile, and you guys have helped me to reconcile those circumstances. And certainly, as a coal miner, what I've learned, what I've clarified is that I'm not divorced from caring about the environment because I'm a coal miner. Because I'm a coal miner doesn't mean that I can be reckless about my opinions about other people's future or reckless about my own opinions. So I've sort of used that as a bit of a mantra and a bit of a guide to follow. Zane's asked me to talk about a transition and what's it look like and how's it going to work. And, for a coal miner, it's got to be the hardest question I've ever had to answer because from the inside, it's a really difficult thing for coal mine workers to look outside of that bubble that they're in. They're really comfortable there. For coal miners, it's the be-all and the means to an end, and that is to look after their families. So my motivation for being a part of this group and other groups and a climate communicator since about 2018 was because of those guys. You know, I recognise my obligation to coal miners because I wouldn't be here tonight if it wasn't for them. You know, at times at work when I might have made a bad decision, they were there to give me a tap on the shoulder and to give me a bit of direction as a young person. And I remember those moments with clarity. So I clearly recognise my obligation to them, and I've persevered in the industry simply because, in simple terms, because to be an example of a person who can be a coal miner but also recognises their responsibilities towards the future. And that future is simply going to happen. And that's been my message to coal miners, is to say that we can't deny what's happening. We have to be a part of it. And it gets a bit lumpy at times, but I encourage them to be part of the conversation. And I suppose that's, you know, in terms of a transition, what does it look like is that coal miners have to be a part of that conversation, and I encourage them to do that. I can also report that as I left Mackay about a week ago, I found out that there were 500 people being employed on an old coal mine site near Collinsville in mine rehab, and so that's a bit of a good news story. It's hard for me to understand and picture jobs for the future of mine workers. You know, they've got a high degree of dexterity. Their skills are applicable to other industries, including hard rock and mineral extraction, which are, you know, the things required for a future generation. And they're quite adaptable people. So the good news story is, 500 people on a mine rehab site, and that job will go on for another 3 to 5 years. I never realised there was so much work or opportunity involved in mine rehabilitation or land improvement. And so I'm really glad to see that actually happening. As a person who has a pastime of doing bush regen and stuff, it's good to see that land being in some way restored or made productive. I'm not sure if I've got much more to add to that. Unless, so I'm happy to invite any questions. I didn't come prepared tonight, so my apologies. And so I was going to ask Zane if I do stumble at this point, to ask me some questions, and maybe I can help you out further.
I reckon you're freestyling it pretty well. Well, thank you for becoming a climate communicator and heading along, because the more people like yourself that do that, the more comfortable, hopefully, other coal workers will feel to be able to follow in your footsteps. And I've got friends who work in the coal industry here in the Hunter Valley, and they're not idiots. They know what climate change is. And I think if we can get to a stage where we can win a tangible transition plan, I think they'll be quite open to moving into other jobs. One of the things we talked about last night is that there's not like just this single silver bullet to transition workers to other jobs or to other pathways. And one of the things we mentioned is that there is an ageing workforce in coal, and if there was generous voluntary redundancies, that may a section of the coal workforce may be interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the interesting part about this, when they talk about coal mining jobs and redundancies, is coal mining has never particularly been secure employment anyway. And so I understand from you guys that you do have concern. I've learnt that you are indeed sincerely concerned about people's future, which includes coal miners. And when I try to process all that, I look at what's already in place. And the main concern that I have is that a lot of the coal mining workforce, when the industry was deregulated, ended up becoming contractors. And those guys are the ones who are sort of particularly vulnerable in terms of that transition or future unemployment. Permanent mine workers, or workers that are employed by large resource companies, certainly do have what I would consider fairly generous redundancy provisions. And so, look, it's no secret, so it's easy to acknowledge that a lot of those guys, if they're given some incentive, then they're actually pretty happy to retire a bit earlier. And as a person who's 60 this year, I would absolutely encourage them to do that and not spend their 70th year underground or in an open cut coal pit. That's a much better way to sort of finish off those last years with your family, perhaps. So there's plenty of people looking for that opportunity, but I do feel somewhat concerned about mine workers who fall under that sort of umbrella of being contractors or in labour hire agreements. And to give you a bit of an idea about some of those agreements, I did work as a labour hire contractor, and I think I was on about 2 hours' notice. That's what was written into my contract, which is amazingly severe. It didn't particularly worry me, but for a younger person with a family, with a mortgage, I find those circumstances absolutely ridiculous, and gives a bit of an indication why they are perhaps show a bit of anxiety and they're sort of reactive when they sort of are confronted by this idea of a change that is obviously happening. So that's my main concern, is that for those people. The good news out of that is that resource owners or coal operators are actually employing more people as full-time workers, and they're moving back away now from casual employment and employment through labour hire companies.
And what do you think of the rising tides demand for a 75% tax on fossil fuel export profits that Maddy mentioned?
I think it's amazing, and as an older person, it's sad for me to have had a whole working life, and for our country to have, I don't want to use the word squander, but missed the opportunity, I suppose, to benefit fully from those resources that have been extracted and subsequently sold. I am aware of the amazing volumes of money that are generated by mineral extraction, and to give you a bit of an example, one coal mine might make around about $5 million a day, and there's about 30 coal mines in the Bowen Basin. It's an amazing amount of money. Half of that money goes to sort of employees, contractors and suppliers, but there's certainly room, if I want to confirm my guess, that we could be doing more to aggregate that money for the community's benefit and to ensure or make provision for that transition. Absolutely. So I totally agree. And then you look, there's examples overseas where other countries, I think it's Norway's done that. And, I don't understand why Australia doesn't look towards some of those other examples rather than following that American sort of style economic sort of management. But, certainly agree and hope that can happen.
All right, well, please give it up once more for Grant and for our entire panel. Now, oh no, don't go, it's not finished yet. Usually at Green Left Forums, we just like to recognise that, these people are not the suppositories of all wisdom, and that the people in the crowd are usually pretty switched on as well. So, at this point, we would like to open up the floor for about 20 minutes. The speakers will have 2 minutes to kind of sum up at the end. But if you have any questions or just general comments about tonight's thing, the vibe, the entire thing, please do chuck your hand up. And we're prioritising... if there's any school strike people, we just wanted to give the first couple of spots to any young people, school strikers who are here, who may have questions. Are there any school strikers here? They're probably off getting drunk on the beach, which is fair enough, that's what I would have been doing when I was that age. All right, so this person up here, and I might just wander around and give the mic to people, and you can have your 2 minute spiel or ask a question.
Hello. Just Grant, is it? Yes.
Hi.
Just wondered if there's a real proposal for a wind turbine factory or industry, because I did speak to a local and they seemed to think it was on the agenda.
Is that for Mackay? Was that area?
I thought it was for here.
Newcastle?
Not sure. What we might do actually is just, if people can write down questions that are coming from the floor on a little bit of paper, or just relinquish it into your brain, and then we'll respond to some of these questions at the end, just because there's probably quite a few people who want to say a bit. So rather than respond to everything, we'll just keep it rolling. This person here.
Kind of a question about the offshore wind as well. There's been a massive campaign from Maritime Union and lots of environment groups in Victoria to develop offshore wind zones down there, and if that goes ahead, that could fuel like 20% of Victoria, and there's potential for that all up and down the east coast, which is really exciting. And I think something that is particularly exciting about that is that they're really good union jobs that are well paid and secure, and that's like an important, I guess, distinction between some of the renewable jobs that are coming up at the moment in like solar PV installation. They're not very well paid, they're more insecure, and something that the coal workers in Australia have done really well is like organise that sector and get good paying conditions. So I'm kind of curious to hear from the panellists what your thoughts on how we can kind of create those good conditions in a renewable sector as well to make it more appealing for workers as well. And maybe it's just a cheeky technical question around like the distinction between transition in metallurgical coal, which is more of a Wollongong thing, I understand, and thermal coal, which is more used for like energy generation. Sometimes you hear the argument that we can't transition out of metallurgical coal because we need it for steel production, which we need for wind turbines and things. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that as well.
Hey everyone, thank you so much to the panel, and it's really amazing to see, such a big turnout at this forum. I was really excited when I saw that this topic was happening because I think it's so important. As Matt mentioned, both of us have been involved in the ASU rank and file group for Palestine. So is Ale and Mick, who's here as well. Yeah, you've got Mick. So I just wanted to tell, like, as quickly as possible as I can. There's a lot has happened in the last 6 weeks, but I just wanted to tell a bit of that story of the rank and file union activism that we've been doing, because I think there's lots of people involved in that who are already thinking, like, how can we apply this to climate? Because this is the kind of union, like, from below activity that we need to bring to the climate movement as well. So, it all started with a petition. Thousands of union members have signed on to that now, and we did that recognising that our unions weren't going to come to the fore straight away. Like, the union bureaucracies were not going to come out on this issue strong enough straight away. We would have to push them to do that. So it's been really amazing meeting with union members. We've had some good wins so far. We've had contingents at rallies. A bunch of our unions have now called for a ceasefire, which I really don't think would have happened without that activity. And we've also been organising blockades at Port Botany. So there's, other blockades in Port of Melbourne. So it's really interesting to see, and that's been really interesting because it's been done with support of the MUA members there. So it's really cool to see unionists from different unions and just community members as well working together and having this blockade that brings workers in the community together, even like having feasts of Palestinian food and being able to send it into the docks to the workers there. I think just like general question to the panel or the room is like, what sort of actions or what sort of activity could we be doing to sort of bring the climate movement and that kind of rank and file unionism closer together?
Hi everyone. I'd just like to talk to my story for a little bit. So my parents' family grew up in a part of Brisbane where there was a factory that leaked a bunch of chemicals that caused a bunch of cancer. I lost my aunt to a frontal lobe cancer about 3 years ago, and I lost my mum to the same cancer this year. It's not genetically transferred. It's because of what was in the environment. And I want everyone here to recognize that just because we're in a Western country, this kind of brutality, because a boss, a business owner, killed my mum, it was murder, this kind of brutality still exists. It's simply more indirect. A cop who protects that system, the system that killed my mum and my aunt, a cop murdered my grandmother in front of my entire family. And I assure you that every working class person in this room has a story of suffering and death at the hands of businesses and police just like that. And that is only going to get worse as climate change hits us harder and harder. And all of this work is really, really good, but the thing we absolutely need is a change in mindset to a revolutionary mindset to call for world working class revolution, to have the change in mindset that although this is indirect, I don't have someone to point a finger at, we are being killed, we are being brutalized, and we are suffering, and I won't let those bastards do this to anyone else anymore.
It's a hard act to follow. Sorry, my name's Jackie and I am a delegate at Geelong Trades Hall. There's a few Geelong people here. So we have been battling in Geelong to get some traction. We did try to do a Hunters Jobs Alliance similar to the Hunters Jobs Alliance in Gippsland, and we called ours Environmental Jobs Alliance Geelong. We spent about 2 years trying to get that going. Trades Hall didn't want to take it as a subcommittee, so we went on our own, but we were aligned with Trades Hall. We had a lot of trouble with the blue-collar unions who stymied us, and they were pretty much aligned with the socialist left of the ALP. The other thing we had problems with was trying to fight, and it was a big community campaign against the Viva gas import terminal, which is still going on. It's kind of it's pretty much a dud deal anyway. But we have been fighting the blue collar unions with that as well. So I guess my question to you is, how do you think we're going to, as the rank and file from the union movement, get some traction with the blue collar unions? How important is that for the transition of jobs to go ahead? And the other question I have is, with the solar industry and other transitional jobs, a lot of those jobs are not unionised. And how do we go forward with the those industries? Thank you.
All right, we'll probably just take a couple more, but look, probably the speakers finished a bit earlier, so we'll take a few more, but we'll probably have to start wrapping it up soonish.
Hello, my name's Carlo. I'm an activist with the Australian Education, so I'm a teacher. One aspect of Rising Tide that hasn't been mentioned is that we have a union liaison committee. Zane's a member. I'm a member. My union, the AEU in the ACT, got a motion up in support of the blockade, in support of the 7-year campaign. That motion is now going to the national level. I've no idea whether it's going to get any traction or not. But we really need such motions from different unions around Australia. So any of you who are active members of unions, I would strongly encourage you to talk to him, because he's got a pen, and join up. Now, my question is, we've heard about the success or relative success in Germany, say, of getting off coal with union programs, union retraining and so on. To what degree have Australian unions you know of made use of those international connections in order to have inputs into decision-making within Australia? Thanks.
Thank you, Carlo. Progressive call list. Any women wanting to ask a question? Okay.
Silencing women.
This is sort of a big question, so no pressure in answering it. I just kind of wanted to open up a point of discussion for transition. I think something I'm really interested in is, obviously we need to bring miners and we need to have First Nations interests at the heart of issues. And I'm just kind of curious how we reconcile the fact that for renewable technologies, we're going to need to my knowledge, still be digging up minerals, and how do we do that while also respecting Indigenous people's land? It's kind of a tricky one, so yeah, I just wanted to kind of posit that. Yeah.
I think tricky questions are important to, get through and tackle. All right, a couple of people from up the back, and then we'll probably have to...
I think like one of the things, like just the first point, the metallurgical coal, and it kind of ties into your point about the like extraction of more materials. So the metallurgical coal, I know that Singapore builds pretty much their entire city on recycled steel, and so they've actually developed the supply chains to source all that recycled material. And they've got, I think, like something like 2,000 workers working at the steel plant, and I think it uses 30% less energy to recycle that, to melt it down. So they have a very efficient system in place. It supports a vast spectrum of different trades, and they completely avoid. They avoid like importing steel because they're able to just recycle the steel from the scrap. So I think that's one thing. And I don't think they use coal. They use very minimal. They don't need to use huge amounts of coal to recycle the steel. So I think that comes into that point of, how much growth do we need and how many resources do we have already that we can recycle and reuse and develop those industries. I think that's a critical point. About, okay, we probably do need to, extract more resources, but we only need to extract more resources if we want to live at a certain level of affluence. So I think one of the main principal ideas is what is an adequate standard of living for people. And, so what do you need? Because depending on what you need, if you say, okay, I want an electric car and I want this and I want that, okay, well then there needs to be more mining. There needs to be more recycling facilities, and then you can, as you have those wastes and it comes at the end of life, you have the recycling facility. So I think that plays a real key part in developing manufacturing industries, and they can take a lot of workers, and manufacturing industries also have, like if you look at Germany, they export something like $1.8 trillion worth of goods, because they're so good at manufacturing.
I think we're just going to have one more and then get back to the panel and wrap it up. But we can then... All right, so Eve. All right,
I'll be quick. Who else? Someone else? Hi. My name's Jim from Sydney. I just want to raise the point which the panel might like to address. That is the sort of opposition that this turn towards renewables is facing. And I want to give you the example of what's happening in the Illawarra, where there's an incredible disinformation campaign being launched, which is a bizarre campaign by right-wing forces, in my opinion, the same sort of forces that are, actually defeated the referendum campaign. We have Peter Dutton now concerned about whales. He's worried about wind farms out off the Illawarra disrupting the whale traffic and destroying the fishing industry. Also, he's got people like surfers. It's a bizarre coalition. People like surfers worried about the waves being disrupted on the beaches at the Illawarra, and I imagine the same sort of thing is no doubt happening at ports. Someone mentioned Port Stephens. I think the same thing's happening. But look, the whole thing is that we do have to be ready to fight against this massive disinformation campaign. The right wing will get very organised, as they did in the referendum campaign, and all sorts of disinformation is going to be thrown out about it. and the unions are very strong on it. The MUA, the Electrical Trades Union, is extremely strong on these alternative renewable areas. So I just think, we've really got to be ready to launch a popular campaign. That's got to be the other side of our campaign, trying to defeat this disinformation tirade that's going on. Thank you.
Our mics are dying, and I think that's a subtle message from the universe that it's just about time to wrap it up. It's going to be a big day tomorrow. All right. Do you want to say a quick word, and then we'll wrap it up and do the thing?
Just, we have actually been live streaming this forum tonight, and so if anybody likes the things that I've heard on the panel tonight and want to share it with friends, look up on the Green Left YouTube channel and you can find it and share it. That'd be a good thing to do. But I just wanted to say, judging by the comments that people have made on the live stream, there's quite a few people who are struck by the comments that Maddy made about capitalism and basically the need to sort of change that. And I think that there's, Maddy sort of made the point, I think the most simple and eloquent explanation for why capitalism is unsustainable is the idea that, well, capitalism needs infinite growth and we've got a finite planet. And Maddy made that point. But to my way of thinking, the second most convincing argument about why capitalism and climate action are sort of incompatible is to do with the fact that, like, if you go along and you say, like, 8 billion people on the planet, why don't you all individually decide to change your consumption habits? That's a very big, sell to make. Whereas, like, say, in oil companies, you can count on two hands the number of big oil companies in the world. It's actually a much simpler job to take control of those tiny handful of corporations and basically democratically control them to actually organise the climate transition. So I wanted to ask, I guess, or just bring up the question of public ownership, which was mentioned, but I guess to see if any comments about, public ownership and democratically taking control of these resources to manage the transition.
Nice. All right. Well, let's go left to right, and everyone just about 2 minutes to respond to that large list of questions and discussion that we just got through. So 2 minutes should be plenty for you to respond to that, I reckon.
Just taking a deep breath in. Wind turbine manufacturing in Niue. I think the industry says it depends on the scale. If you have enough wind turbines here, the zones are large enough along the east coast, around the country, then we could maybe make a case for manufacturing them here. How do we create good conditions in renewable generation? I think it's about union density. There's places out, a lot of these solar farms are out, kind of in remote regional areas, and there's certain, rules around union organising at the moment that make it difficult for unionists to get out into communities that don't have a history of unionisation and don't have membership pre-existing on site. Right of access laws could change there. At the moment, if you're a union official and you go on site and you don't have a reason to be there, you can cop a personal fine of up to $50,000. Yep, shameful. And how do we get away from coke and coal? Not really sure on that one. I think there's a test plant in Germany. ThyssenKrupp has it. They're producing coal with green hydrogen. Obviously, the plan is to have a green hydrogen facility in the port here. Offshore wind, again, critical to make that happen. How do we bring the climate movement and rank and file unionism closer together? So the 100 Jobs Alliance, when it was kind of determining its first agenda and going through those phases, we still do stuff like this. We got rank and file members in a room with other community members and asked them what their priorities were. They came back to us at the time with TAFE having an authority to kind of manage the transition and then attracting investment and creating the actual jobs themselves. How, as the rank and file, do we get traction with blue-collar unions like 100 Jobs Alliance did? Look, that is a really good question. I have tried to, Maddy's recently been talking to us with a group from Wollongong about, trying to do something similar there. I've had people from Gippsland in Lean reach out to me trying to do stuff with Trades Hall there. Look, the fact is that it is, the essential thing about 100 Jobs Alliance is that it is hyper-local, and it is difficult to recreate the particular circumstances in terms of the people who are involved and who really made that happen. It has to have buy-in from some key people. I think that it's, rather than trying to say we're going to do the exact same thing, it's maybe a better approach to take the principle of we're going to try and find a way for us and the political capital that can come out of working with community and environmentalists for unions and for union memberships, because that's who they're interested in representing. Try and take that more broadly. At the moment, that could be around supporting offshore wind development, or it could be around providing social license for projects. I know that in Victoria, when we were down there, the activists were in Gippsland, but actually probably the best opportunity to work with the union down there, of all things, it was with the Australian Workers Union around their, around the Portland aluminium smelter. And we couldn't take that because it's just the activists weren't in that area and they wanted to do something in Gippsland and didn't work out. But I would just say be flexible, look for where you can help, and that's the best way to, that's the best way to make something happen. And it might not look exactly like that, but maybe it leads there. Sorry, yeah. I've got the full. It's just
let me answer some of the questions.
Yeah, sorry.
Any final word?
No, final word. Do you want the list of questions?
No, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good, mate. Okay, I just want to say quick couple of things. Okay, so on larger things, the avenue of constitutionalism, I know post-referendum could seem dead, but I do believe it is an important mechanism. Obviously, we heard before, the 20th century was faced a lot of battles around socialisation of industry and distribution. I was really proud to be a big participant in the Save Our Shipping campaign, which has amounted to absolutely fuck all, but that is an important part of the supply chain. We need to understand that, in response to your question about democratic control of a few key corporations, energy is the basis basically for everything, right? Energy is the basis for industrialisation. It's the basis for power. The police are retrofitted day in, day out with new highly mechanised vehicles. Energy, wherever you can get it, is the basis for society. And so I think that's the place you need to target. The tax will work. Will work as a way to get the fossil fuel companies that are pillaging our lands, our traditional lands, get them to pay for a replacement that is not exploitative. That is the only way we're going to, get past this hurdle of ephemery, right? 20 decades of extraction for, the fastest mammalian extinction rate in the world. Like, we need to get over this ephemeral sort of love we have. Lastly, I want to say other things around. I think I'm a Republican. I think economic nationalism or socialism is what is required. There has to be at least a series of constitutional conventions where we ask Australian people, what basic rights do you want to have? I think that there is... We're so constrained in Australia because we don't see, but like in other countries, I know Chile is maybe not the best example, but there's so many countries around the world where they have a cultural revolution with the founding document or the active document. And as I saw with the referendum, I saw a lot of Aboriginal people believing in the Australian Constitution more than Australians themselves. And that's really just, that should tell you something, right? That should tell you that the national identity doesn't have any other goals at the moment other than profit and maybe amongst the people, mateship. So small things, taxes, larger things, socialisations. I don't know.
A lot of questions. I think that I want to touch it. That's okay. There's not time to go through them all anyways. But I think I want to touch a little bit on, I guess, a bit more about why, climate solutions are incompatible with capitalism. And I guess, under capitalism, we are bred to have this mindset of individualism and scarcity. And it actually means that, that is also fueling how much we need to exploit the land and each other in order to kind of hold up this lifestyle. And I guess that is a cause or a result rather of capitalism, and thinking more democratically about how we do things, thinking more communally, is part of the solution. I guess another thing I want to touch on is how we work with unions and people in unions. And I think, like Tim said, we've been talking about that a bit in Wollongong, and really the offshore wind farms is providing an opportunity for that to happen, and it is happening. We are having conversations where where environmental groups and unions are working together, and I think it's really exciting. And I think that we're trying to take that opportunity and run with it. So I hope that I guess overall focusing on the solutions as well as the root cause can kind of be what brings people together. I might finish there.
Yeah, sorry guys, I don't know if I can speak to any of those questions, but I would say that as part of the coal industry, one thing I've learnt from them is that one proposition is to how do you change culture, and the solution to that was one conversation at a time. And so I would absolutely encourage everybody, all of us, to continue those conversations you guys are having, one conversation at a time. They're all absolutely important in terms of turning this thing around and getting it to move in a direction that we need it to go in.
I 100% agree with Grant that it's one conversation at a time, and trying to see people at their level. It's surprising how many connections that you can make with people when you start conversing with them. The other thing to point out, I think, is that we have a lot more power than we think we do, because another panel that I was invited to speak at was about divestment. Now, many of you might have heard of market forces that do a lot of work with companies and their shareholders and so on. So if you are a person who wants to put your money to good use and completely get rid of all your investments, and even things like you don't think that you're investing in fossil fuels, but you really are, in things like insurance and so on, superannuation. Start from the lowest hanging fruit, your bank account, then health insurance and car insurance, anything like that. Look at the companies that are backing them, and basically do all your homework, or be like me, and I'm really lazy with my homework. So, like, I go to Market Forces website and just, look up that information that they've actually done for you already. So, anything that you can think of that you spend money on, you can have an impact on. The second thing I'd like to say is that communities have got so much power you just do not know with this new energy landscape, because the new renewables energy landscape is nothing like the old one, where things are centralized and your distribution systems are pretty static. You can now have microgrids where your own community can own wind farms. There's Hepburn Wind Farm, for instance. They've only got two wind generators, but they're powering their entire community. And the community purchased it, owns it, runs it, right? So you can do things like that locally. Not only is it great for communities, it also offers a lot of resilience. So when you have things like bushfires, well, who's going to come and rescue you and rebuild all those distribution cables? The easiest way to do it is using microgrid, right? So, where's the mean? Anyway, okay, I'll shut up now.
Okay, well, we're pretty much getting towards the end. I did just have an announcement for all of the Novocastrians in the building, Mullabimba locals. There is a screening of the film Freedom is Beautiful, and that is the story of Farhad Bandeh and Mustafa Azmitaba on Manus Island. That screening is happening at 6:30 p.m. on Friday the 8th of December at the Royal Exchange in Bolton Street, Newcastle. And Farhad and Mustafa will sort of introduce the film via Zoom and talk a bit about it. So that's being put on by Hunter Asylum Seeker Advocacy. Check them out on Facebook if you're not already following them. And yeah, if you see the Green Left stall and you want to come and get a copy of Green Left, please do. Please subscribe to Green Left at greenleft.org.au and support independent lefty media. That is it. Thank you very much to all our panellists. Please give them a hand. And thank you for all the questions from the floor. And it is an absolute honour to be, given this forum here, and to see the well-oiled machine that has developed, that is Rising Tide over the last almost 20 years. So, get a good night's rest, and let's get stuck into it tomorrow. Good on you.